What's up everybody, and welcome back to the channel and to another Outriders video. Today we're going to be looking at a build that I've been putting together for a while now, and that is Deathproof on the Devastator featuring the Boulder Dash skill. The reason why I've sort of took a long time to come around to this is because I wanted to experiment with different ways of putting it together, whether it should be firepower and anomaly or just firepower or potentially even just anomaly. And in the end, the build that we're going to look at today is the best version that I can have for that. But I'm very much open to suggestions from your side of things that I should try, ways that I should try to put it together. I will be straight up right from the start and say that this is not a style of play in Outriders that I really enjoy. And perhaps that was also the reason why it took so long to record this video. But nonetheless, I hope you enjoy it. In fact, if you do, or you like this video in any way, please do consider giving a like and subbing to the channel. Maybe sharing the video with a buddy. It really does help the channel grow, and it just means a whole lot to me. Without any further ado, let's go. Now, straight off the bat, when you are putting this together, you are of course using the Boulder Dash skill because that's intrinsically included with the Deathproof set, and so many of the mods on the Deathproof set are for this skill, so it kind of wouldn't make sense not to. And then it also makes sense to probably go into one of the defensive skills, Golem or Reflect Bullets, because again you can leverage some powerful weapon buffs or weapon increased damage or anomaly increased damage in those cases. And then your third skill is really sort of the sky's the limit here in terms of what you think you should be using. I have seen versions of this build that use Leap, I've seen versions of this build that use Impale, and I've seen versions of this build that use Tremor. So there are many different ways that you can go here, and I think fundamentally the main thing is that you are virtually unkillable with this build, especially once you get used to the way of playing it. And that's essentially using Boulder Dash the entire time. The minute you don't use this skill a lot is when you start noticing a little bit of gaps in terms of damage and also possibly in terms of survivability, depending of course on how you build it. Now, it's very important your choice of tree that you use to build here comes into play. I think probably the more popular choice is to go middle tree because of the capstone that you get at the end of that and how that interacts with an increase to firepower as well as an increase to anomaly. Now, in terms of overall power level, I would definitely rank this, I would say, a strong third option for Devastators, and that's simply because I think you have a lot more versatility when it comes to the seismic commander, in the fact that you can go full debuff with bleeds, everything like that, or you can go full offense with also bleeds, earthquakes, leaps, and things like that. And then of course Marshall allowing to go really deep into debuffing, but also an extremely movable and just high utility Devastator, which both of these still, Seismic and Marshall, still enjoying the benefit of playing the Devastator class and being very hard to kill, which kind of was implied to me that with the idea of a set called Deathproof. My feeling was that this would truly be the impossible to kill Devastator, but in the actual fact all Devastators are almost impossible to kill. So I think that the benefit that we get from the set bonus, which is of course the lessened cooldown on Boulder Dash as well as the small increase to firepower of like 15%, is not enough to make this attractive, at the very least not for me. I'm sure there's people out there who disagree, and I say power to you if you want to roll Deathproof. But for me, I definitely think that this is something that people can fly, I'm gonna say people can fly, and people can fly, can definitely look at in the future to potentially either make the Boulder Dash skill more attractive by making it do more stuff, perhaps incorporating some of the mod effects that you get from the mods into the skill by default, just making it a lot better, and then maybe changing some of those mods around or making them enhance those effects further, or perhaps develop the firepower increase that we get from this even more. But that being said, as it stands right now, this is the Deathproof set, so let's go ahead and jump into the detail. First thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and look at the skills. And so as mentioned here, of course, we are using Boulder Dash, and this gets down to a cooldown of 1 second, and this is largely due to the fact of, you know, the set bonus that we get from Deathproof, but also some mods which you can load on there. And then my choice of protective skill or skill that allows me to essentially ramp up my damage is Golem. Of course, an option here is also Reflect Bullets. I chose Golem because honestly though, because I tend to usually use Reflect Bullets, and so I wanted to play around with Golem a bit. But I definitely think both of them are good solid options here. I think Golem is probably the better one due to the fact that you're constantly going to be boulder dashing, and unless you mod in a mod to reflect bullets that allows you to move around while it's on and use other skills, you're going to be locked in that animation. And so then it's really only about using it to ramp up your damage, not actually getting the survivability from it, which is another reason why I went Golem. And then, like I said, your third skill is kind of like open. So I've seen, as I've mentioned, some builds that have gravity leap in it for the movability and just getting around the map, perhaps getting a debuff built in there so that your co-op teammates can benefit from additional anomaly power through something like despair. Or you can, I've seen some builds using impale. I've seen some builds using endless mass to pull the enemies together so that you can boulder dash onto them. All of those are very, very viable options. And the only real thing keeping you back is having to look and see how many mods you can actually stack on to make those skills better. In the case of what we're looking at here today, though, I've included Tremor because, again, it was a skill that I hadn't used that much before. And because I like the idea of, while I'm doing this boulder dash around, the tremors are firing off, they're giving me additional life, everything like that, and I'm just, you know, surviving even more. Now, when we get to the actual weapons itself, if you're going to go top tree, which in this case I haven't, but if you're going to go top tree, there's definitely some you know, it's kind of like a good idea to go towards shotguns because so much of the damage for the Devastator is built towards close range, but also with some good buffs for shotguns. So, but the other reason that I chose to use the Death Shield is because it has Fortress on it by default. That means, yes, I could use something like Fatal Symbiote with Dark Sacrifice on it and then just put Fortress on there, which is also something that I played around with. But however, I do like the fact that I can sort of just use the Death Shield and I could just fire off the hip, get those Claymore Torrents to come down. I can fire 3 times to, you know, get the Fortress buff to proc, and I can essentially just use it around like that. But definitely, you are going to be doing almost 99% of your engagements in the close range sphere, so obviously it makes sense to pick something that's strong in close range. You can't go wrong with a shotgun in that regard. Now, as my secondary, I'm using the Anemoy, which features the Moaning Winds reload mechanic. And I know that this is a topic of contention for people that usually watch builds. You get some people that see, oh wait, Moaning Winds, fuck it, I'm not even watching anymore. But the point is this: do you need Moaning Winds to play this build? No, not at all. Does it increase the speed by which you can clear expeditions? Yes. This is unfortunately true, but it's not just a Deathproof Devastator thing. This is a all character thing. There's a reason why Moaning Winds meta is a thing in speedruns, and it's because it's just so incredibly efficient at dealing a lot of damage to enemies around you. And certainly in the case of this build, where you're boulder dashing into enemies and you're right amongst all these enemies, it makes even the most sense of it all. So that's simply the reason why I'm using it. It is a very, very strong option. And for me, it always comes down to a case of efficiency and wanting to get as many expeditions done in an hour as I can. And so it just makes the most sense. On the pistol, I have, again, the Moaning Winds meta on here. So I have Moaning Winds and Clip Combustion on here. But generally speaking, with this build and as I run it, and I'm sure as you've seen it in the footage that's been running, I only really cycle between these two weapons and I don't really go pistol. And that's because you deal enough damage that you pretty much kill everything without having to do that. Now, when we go over to the armor itself, I chose 3 pieces of the Deathproof set based on their substats. So I chose the head, the chest, and the legs. And that's because those pieces give bonus firepower. The gloves and the boots give health, and in this case I wanted to stack as much firepower as I could so that I could deal as much damage as I could with the shotgun and with the ramp up mechanic that I'm getting through the middle tree of Devastator. So in this case, as mentioned, the Deathproof set is going to give you bonus firepower, close range damage, and healing received. That's actually going to be on all 3 of these pieces. Now, for the other 2 pieces, I went for bonus firepower, close range damage, and then I took cooldown reduction. Now, can you use healing received? Absolutely. Can you use something like skills life leech? For sure. The point is that the reason why I chose cooldown reduction is because of my 3rd skill, which I didn't know at the time of starting to build this, what I would really settle up on. For a while there, I thought, it's probably going to be gravity leap. I really like that. And then for a while, I goofed around with endless mass. And so the cooldown reduction that we have on there is primarily to get those skills down, because all of those skills that I've just mentioned now, whether it's gravity leap, whether it's tremor, whether it's endless mass, whether it's impale, all of them, they have fairly high cooldowns. So if you're not chipping away at those cooldowns a little bit though, you're going to have a skill that's basically only usable twice a minute, which is never very much fun. So when we go on here, the first mod that we have on here is Primal Weakness. Now this says that when you boulder dash onto stuff, it reduces their resistances by 50%, and this is a permanent effect. This is a good thing because it means that your co-op buddies are also benefiting from it. But also remember though that this is resistance, and so therefore this would only really benefit from people casting sort of spells on it or abilities on it. And resistance isn't really affected by people shooting enemies. So unless in the case of if you have if you have co-op partners that are shooting them with bullet-based builds, then of course it makes that difference. But nonetheless, I just wanted to put that out there. Then I have Stare into the Barrel here. This boosts my firepower by 10k for every enemy that's in close range. You're going to be jumping and doing boulder dash into close range the whole time. So as long as there's 2, 3, 4 enemies standing around, you're always going to be getting 30 to 20, 40k of additional firepower, because this can stack all the way up to 5 times. Then on the chest piece, I've got Captain Hunter, because while trash as usual is no problem, especially if you use things like on my weapon here where I have Claymore Torrent, trash is going to die like super easy to this build, especially in the combination of how you're using your skills. But your real issue is going to be bosses and elites and captains that take a little bit longer to kill. So anything that you can do to make that go quicker is 100%. Then on here I have Primal Armor. Now this says every time when boulder dash ends, my armor is doubled for 7 seconds. Now this class by default has a lot of armor, and let me actually just quickly take off my camera here. You'll see I have 109k armor there, and that's before we start, you know, messing around with abilities, and so you can end up with something like 220 to 240, 260k armor easily, and that of course affects all of the rest of your abilities, as we'll see when we look at some of the mods. But the point here is that this doubles it for 7 seconds, and your cooldown on boulder dash is 1 second, so you could literally always have this buff up. Next we go over to the legs, and on here we have Primal Chain Gun. Now Primal Chain Gun is one of the stronger, or one of the better boulder dash mods, I would say. This says every enemy damaged by the skill increases your weapon damage by 15% for 10 seconds. Now this can stack 5 times, which means you can end up with a 75% increase to weapon damage. Now it's very important, weapon damage is the point here. But nonetheless, this is one of the ways that you can really cycle up your damage. Now, I have Death's Door on here, which says that it doubles your armor whenever. So this is our second armor doubling effect. This doubles your armor whenever your health drops below 35%. Now, this was actually a mod that was suggested to me by someone. And in testing, the few times that I've gone that low in terms of or health rather, it's been phenomenal. The problem, I would say, is because the build is so durable and because you're stacking so much survivability and you're stacking so much armor, that you very seldomly actually go below 35%. And so you kind of don't benefit from this a lot unless you take 2 or 3 very bad hits and you're not boulder dashing, anything like that. So absolutely the better way to benefit more from Death's Door would be to involve something like I mentioned over here, Dark Sacrifice, which is just passively draining your life in any case. And then it means if you take 1 or 2 bad hits, you're in that position where you can capitalize from that. But in my experiment with, at least in the way that I have this set up right now, I'm definitely not benefiting enough from this effect. So this is potentially one that can be either changed unless I change the weapon, as I've mentioned. When we get over to the hands, we've got Primal Rage on here. This reduces the skill's cooldown by 50%. And by default, you get the cooldown of Boulder Dash with the set bonus and all of that. You get it to around just under 2 seconds. And so then when you slap this on, the cooldown's 1 second, and there you go. So literally, by the time you press the button and you finish the run animation, the next Boulder Dash is ready. And so you can keep doing this over and over and over again and just never stop. On here I have a damage ramp up mechanic in Bloodlust, which says that killing shots increase your firepower by 17.5k, and this can stack up 3 times because you're going to be killing a lot of stuff with your weapons. That also makes sense that you want to be capitalizing as much from your firepower, and since this is a firepower build, it also makes sense. When we get over to the boots, this is a piece that I rolled. Now I have my only mod for Tremor on here, which is Crush Sequence, which gives me 2 additional explosions from Tremor. This is, I would say, my free sort of slot where I can, if I put on leap, I can put despair in here to help my buddies that are dealing anomaly damage to enemies. Maybe I can put in a second jump with leap if I want to jump around twice before going on cooldown. With endless mass, I can put in a beneficial mod in here if I rather want to use that. So this is really your spare mod slot where you can put different things in. And then I have buckshot shells on here, which increases my shotgun weapon damage by 10%. This is also something like if you're going to be using submachine guns and everything like that, then this is also another mod that you would swap out. And you could potentially look at, you know, maybe putting something like sharp eye in there. Like let's say, for example, instead of running my shotgun setup, you went for the fatal symbiote. Then it would maybe make sense to have bloodlust and sharp eye on there, so you get all that benefit, because definitely with a submachine gun you'll probably be aiming down the sights when you kill stuff, and then you can proc sharp eye as well. Now last but not least, we're going to go into the class tree, and as I've said, this is middle tree Devastator, and this is the one where I still feel like the capstone doesn't really perform like the way it's supposed to perform. But nonetheless, I tried this in two different setups. I tried top tree, like a firepower build of it, and then I tried the middle tree. Overall, I was happier more with the performance of the middle tree, but that doesn't mean that top tree is not viable and not possible, and definitely something I encourage you to try out, especially if you're looking at building this. So what we're doing with middle tree is we're just going along, we're picking up as much, you know, mitigation, meaning like much armor, much health, everything as we can, resistance, everything, because all this is just going to increase our ability to tank damage. We also do want to get into the fray, which says that basically when we end a boulder dash, we get 15% flat damage mitigation for 10 seconds. And we're boulder dashing the entire time, so that damage mitigation is always there. Now, if you decide to use leap, for instance, as well, that's also going to benefit from this. So is endless mass. Then what we do want to pick up is heirloom armor. And this is when an enemy dies in close range of you, which is where most enemies die when you play this, especially if you play solo. 20% of their armor will be transferred to you for 10 seconds. So again, there's just more armor there. And if you don't know yet, the point where we're trying to stack as much armor as possible comes later in the build when we get to the capstone. Now, we do have stone circle on here as well. It's a natural one to pick up as we're going down there, and this increases the distance that's considered to be close range. Now, close range is 12 meters, so this makes it 16 meters, which makes it almost long range, which is good. And then over here it says through the mob, increase your armor by 7% for each enemy in close range. Now, because you're making that close range circle bigger, you're also just increasing the amount of armor that you get from the enemies that are standing around. Now, I do take anomaly bullets down here because this basically allows me to increase my firepower by 15% of my anomaly power. Now, my anomaly power is not massively high, but that's just giving me another 15% of that, which is basically, you know, about, I guess it's what 7.5, 8k, something like that. But in any case, the options that you have here is, instead of going down here, you could go down this way. And so then you could pick up this, which increases your anomaly power by 45%. Or what you could do is you could go up here and you could say, and both of these are skills that proc off you enabling golem or what is it called, reflect bullets. So in this case, we could get more anomaly, and in this case, we could get more weapon damage, depending on whichever one you want. So the sky's the limit here. If you don't want to go this route that I did here, you can instead tap down this way or tap up that way. It's all good. Now we're just going along and we're continuing to pick up all of these different, you know, mods that we need to get to the capstone at the end here. And then of course we pick out overload of the battleground, which says that you gain additional 10% health for each enemy that died at close range. Now that just means that this is your healing effect, right? So instead of, when you look over here, you'll see that it says every close range kill heals you by 24% of your max health. This then in actual fact makes it 10% more. That's what that means. Then last but not least, Mighty Tank is the capstone of Middle Tree of Warden. And this says that your firepower is increased by 5% of your armor, and your anomaly power is increased by 5% of your armor. But this is capped at 40% of your total power. So in a way, it's obviously not a one-to-one translation, because I think that would be broken as hell. But it's this interaction with this capstone and what you get from Fortress, where Fortress has this damage mitigation effect that stacks up with the percentages, that allows people to do these crazy like 18.5 million AP, 18.5 million firepower, those sort of things. And it's the interaction of that that's essentially proccing that effect. And that's it for the build and for the video. As always, I want to thank you so much for watching, especially if you made it this far. Let me know in the comments down below how you would improve this, or how you've built your Deathproof. Devastator, and also which skills and which mods you think are better for this kind of setup, and if this is even a build that you're interested in building. But more importantly, I want you to have a fantastic morning, a great afternoon, and a super awesome evening wherever you are in the world. And until next video, fucking cheers.
They want the best of me now, best of me now, best of me now, best of me. They want the best of me now, best of me now, best of me now, best of me. They want the best of me.